alive! Yay!
Hooray! In a distraction from the rest of the world being horrible and bad, we can finally talk about good Doctor Who episodes again. Yay.
Yay.
And we were talking about the second season finale. And general thought, I didn't like the first one, but I really liked the second one.
This is gonna be interesting. This is one of those episodes where my, opinion on it changes in small but significant ways every time I see it. And, I wanted to be angry with Rose this time around, but I couldn't. Don't get me wrong, I also have enough boiling hot hatred toward Rose to power, 5 nuclear warehouses.
Let the hate flow through you.
I'll get to it later, but there are things in this episode that I was like, oh wow, I'm really perceiving those differently than I used to whenever I watched these.
I guess we'll start out with the first episode.
Yeah, let's go in order for once. Let's not go in reverse order.
So I guess just talking about the ghosts, again, this is something that I had more with previous viewings than this time around, but how disappointed or not were you with what the ghosts ultimately ended up being? Because that's another one of those things where I'm like, I kind of feel like this could be its own episode where it's a different thing and we just really just spend a whole hour exploring the ghost thing.
My thing is, people assume that it's like dead ones and stuff. It's not like they're actually doing anything to trick people into thinking that.
They have an aura about them, is the implication. Because Jackie's dad's ghost comes back and she smells the old cigarettes on him.
Explain that is this that's in the human's head. That's what
Yeah.
it is.
Because that is what it is.
Example of why wishful thinking is bad.
Yes.
Yeah. This show is going to contradict that at some points, but in this instance, yeah, maybe not so much.
I didn't care for the explanation for it. Okay, if it
Except-
was some kind of field, that would have been fine.
Although I will say this in regards to the ghosts, we pretty much do the exact same thing with the ghosts that we did with the Slovene in series 1. We almost have the exact same scene where they're sitting in front of the TV and just flipping through channels talking about aliens.
Yeah, they do.
How all these connected, we have no idea.
Russell T. Davis, I don't know, trope. He has a thing about people going through the channels.
Get away with having a global scale on a TV budget.
Framing of the scene, shot reverse shot from the TV to the Doctor and Jackie and Rose sitting on the couch. It's a bizarre parallel. Although I will say this episode does it way better than Aliens of London did, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it's mainly because of the thing with the implication that the ghosts just have a thing where it's people just take to them. And it is partially just human wish fulfillment, but it is also partially that the ghosts have a thing about them where once they show up, people are just this just feels right. It's more sense that they would become a normal thing for daily life in a matter of months than the friggin' Slovene. I seriously don't understand. The Slovenes show up and all of these shows that would have to be filmed within a week or aren't being filmed on the day just happen to have alien gimmicks ready for when they show up unannounced.
Yeah.
Here it makes more sense. The only two things I don't buy are that the ectoshine thing, unless we get an idea of who made that, I don't know how that exists.
It must be Saxon. Take my word for it.
Who made this and why and how in so little time? And also, are really just taken with the ghosts. I don't buy that they would be getting roles in scripted television. We flip to a soap opera that I'm sure English people know that I don't, and there's a ghost with a role in the show, and it's who had the idea to give these things scripts and lines of dialogue, and how?
Have you seen what Hollywood has been making lately?
True.
Working with animals, except these things have only existed for a couple of months, so that's a bit weird to me.
I don't even know how they get them on the set. They should be just kind of wandering around.
It would be hilarious. Did one of them just pop up on the set and they're well, this thing is here now. We might as well take advantage and film it.
That's probably what happened. It's like a Cyberman, very confused.
Why don't they just schedule their filming schedules around the shifts? Because it's established that people are well aware of the shifts ghosts have.
Yeah. I love that line also. Since when did ghosts have shifts? Since when did shifts have ghosts?
sense now, Doctor. It makes perfect sense. Stop thinking about it.
I don't know why it took me so long to realize this, but like this episode and the ghosts walking around and stuff is the first time ever that we hear the Torchwood theme. And it should have been a no-brainer to me that that's where that theme would come from, but I'm just now picking up on it.
Like 10 years later.
Yeah, like it
Yeah.
starts with this episode.
I've been very hardcore into Torchwood, so I have been aware of it for a long while.
I think it's just because I haven't gone back to this episode in a while. Like, I didn't actually make too much notes on this, but do we have anything to say about, like, Torchwood just as an entity in this episode versus what it becomes later?
It seems like it's, run kind of better and it has more of a budget.
Well,
That's
it's
all.
not a ragtag operation, yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they have less morality and are just gonna do stuff because, well, if it's gonna benefit us, why the hell not?
That is true, but another thing that like changed about this episode for me is that I used to think of like Yvonne as pretty explicitly a bad person and Torchwood is like a bad thing. But in this episode, she comes off like way better than I remember her coming off. Like she's
Yeah.
kind of antagonistic. Like anyone who's constantly pointing guns at you is.
Yeah.
But the thing in either episode that makes her seem evil, like I kind of used to think about her. There's a scene where she threatens to have Rose shot because like, what is she doing walking around? Like,
That's just Torchwood.
yeah, but like even the doctor like knows that she's not being serious. Like he doesn't get angry with her for threatening to shoot Rose. He's just like, well, it was worth a shot. And then they just go back to business as usual. It's like
Yeah.
they both know that she's not being really serious.
Yeah, she's not evil. She might make threats and stuff like that, but she's not going to hurt anybody that doesn't deserve it. And it does seem like she kind of wants to do the right thing during the episodes and stuff. Like,
Yeah, like her and Harriet Jones have this thing where it's like, they're really bad because they're trying to control too much. They're trying to like control is bad, but at the same time, it's like, no, you can understand where they're coming from. Like they're not actively malicious.
It seems like Wifala Hartman, her paid character flaw is that her nationalism mentality causes her to be very stubborn.
Yeah. I do like that she is kind of jingoistic, and that's where a lot of her problems stem from.
but even she kind of listens because, like, when the doctor was telling her, like, every time you pull that switch, you risk like breaking the universe and stuff. And she's like, okay, maybe I should.
Yeah. I love that scene also. It's something that I always pick up on when I watch this episode is that scene in particular and the way it doesn't threaten her. He's like, okay, fine. You know what? Go ahead, do it. I'm just going to sit here and watch. And he's got like this goofy smirk and it keeps cutting back from Yvonne to him. And with each like cut back to his face, it gets progressively less goofy and more serious. And it's honestly kind of intimidating. And you can see why she would like shut it off after that.
Like, maybe I should rethink this. He's getting a little scary over there.
Yeah, it's a really gradual like facial shift.
Let's talk about the doctor with Jackie and those scenes together.
Yes.
I'm gonna kill you.
Those are my favorite out of the whole episode.
And that smile Rose gives when she says, "My mom is still on board."
Yeah.
That little exchange is actually the first like clip of this episode I ever saw. Like before I knew what this show was and I was just watching clips on YouTube, I just watched this clip of like the doctor going around talking like a crazy person. And Rose is like, my mom's still on board. And I'm like, what is the circumstance behind this happening?
Of Alonzo.
It would be great if I met someone called Alonzo. And then I could say
So
Alonzo.
even asks my father Hartman if they have someone in the Torchwood staff called Alonzo.
It's like, I don't think so.
On a
Also,
side note, I just love that they take the James Bond route with having the doctor prisoner.
he's prisoner in name only. He still just kind of has his run of the place.
Still like giving advice, and people are still kind of listening to him, even though it's like, this guy's the prisoner, right? Why are we listening?
And it's like he just strolls into the room with the orb thing, and they're just like, "Oh, hey, can you explain this also?" He's just like, "Yeah." But like episodes like this are why I find it like hard to empathize with people who don't like Jackie. Like she's so great, like she's hilarious, and she and Ten have such like genuine chemistry.
A lot of people don't like Jackie, but I do like her in both these episodes.
A lot of people hate that she's loud and English, typically loud English mother.
She has given birth to Rose, so
Yeah, Rose had to get that from somewhere.
and there's some pretty bad moments with her. This episode, though, I wish Jackie was like this kind of all the time, just more for comic relief and banter with the Doctor.
And like she and Mickey both are at this point where like they genuinely like him and they're not like butting heads and stuff. Where like Rose and the Doctor show up and she like smothers him and kisses and it's like what? And the Doctor's
And
just like
after the Doctor's just like, ugh, God.
when he pulls her out of the TARDIS, he's like, "Oh yeah, staring into the time vortex, it aged her 50 years." And she's like, "I'm 40."
Deluded bless. And Mickey's gone full badass.
Yes.
Yep, he's a badass now.
And that's another thing I love, where like their relationship has progressed clearly. Like the last time that they really had conflict over anything was in Age of Steel and like Rise of the Cybermen. And like now the Doctor shows up, he's like, "Mickey, nice to see you." And he's like, "You too, boss."
You call the person that purposely got your name wrong when you first met him boss.
He is in charge.
They have an understanding now because Mickey is not like into Rose anymore, and
It's Ricky.
yeah, Ricky.
10 just being considerably more sociable than 9.
But that was a rivalry thing going on.
I feel like was still the part of him that just didn't see Mickey's value, even though another part of him did. He shows up with a giant space gun to destroy Cybermen. It's like, you can't really be making fun of his name anymore at that point.
Mickey can carry a giant space gun better than Rose can in Series 4.
Oh, we will get to that. We'll get to my problems with that. We could talk about freaking the Daleks and the Cybermen and how they have like a petty little your mom fight. It's just a little insult off. It's great.
Yeah.
The Daleks are better at burns. This is not war. This is pest control.
Give fear and only one respect. What is that? You are better at dying.
Answer the question, if the Dalek and the Cyberman got into a fight, who would win?
Cybermen fans everywhere were pissed.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, what did you expect?
Like the first Dalek episode and stuff, it's like one can take out millions of people and incinerate half a nation. It's like, yeah, they're gonna be able to take Cyberman out easily.
If you have a thing where, like, you think this is just, like, Russell being biased toward the Daleks, and so he makes them look better, but, like, just going based off of what we already know, no, like, there's no contest. Like, one Dalek, one Cyberman, that fight is over in, like, 2 seconds.
I think the reason why there's always going to be a versus thing between the two of them is because, like, two most known enemies on the show.
Yeah, it's such a great novelty.
It's like the Batman versus Superman thing.
Save Martha! Why did you say that name?
I will say, to this episode's credit, like, the Daleks are clearly more of a threat to the Cybermen, and yet both of them feel legitimately threatening enough to the humans. So it's not like the Daleks being that much better make the Cybermen suddenly less of a problem. That one family's house that we see the Cybermen break into, like, we don't see them again, right? Those guys are definitely dead.
No, we see them again when the Cybermen make their live broadcast. Just slowly looked at the Cybermen standing next to them, which is unintentionally hilarious.
I'm gonna assume that they're totally dead.
I think they were just perfectly fine since the Cybermen are seen leaving all the houses in order to take on the military and the Daleks at the same time.
Right, but did they leave those houses intact, or did they kill everyone and then leave? It wouldn't take that long, I don't think. Doesn't make sense to me that they wouldn't.
I can't remember, but I do think they make it like Edward said. I think so. They just like walk out of the house, I want to say.
It depends, because I don't remember their speech all that great. Do they say that they want to, like, convert everyone or kill everyone? Because if
they want to convert everyone, you will become like us.
Yeah, because if it wasn't, then we would have them all, like, lined up like they were in the other dimension, like, going to the slaughter, and that doesn't happen. So I guess they just kind of leave them to their own devices to sit and watch TV for a couple minutes.
It's like me being like, great, this siren is just staying next to me. I guess I'll watch Blade Runner again.
You're just really terrified for like those 10 minutes where you're like, what is happening, until they just leave the house.
Just think about that. That would be so awkward. You'd be like petrified and you think, oh my god, I'm gonna die from an alien robot invasion or something.
And then they just walk out.
It might be the last pizza I ever eat, so
How do we feel about just like the inclusion of Pete and that whole thing?
Considering they didn't know whether or not they would get Billy Piper to come back in that Billie Piper was officially leaving to move on to better things, they figured they should might as well tie everything up and give the Rose fans as much closure as possible.
The only
Yeah.
real purpose in the context of this story is that it's the finale for Rose, and so we should probably give her
The
something.
first finale for Rose.
At the time, we think it's the real finale for Rose. And so we
Yeah.
try to tie things up as much as possible. And like him and Jackie reuniting is really heartwarming. And yeah, this is great.
Well, I thought you didn't like where Jackie and Pete where they meet together in the hallway.
See myself like distanced from the episode thinking that feels really weird. Like even if it is an alternate version of your loved one, it's not the same person. That's kind of strange. But as I'm sitting down with the episode, it's like, doesn't bother me. I want these two to be happy. If they make each other happy, fine. Who cares?
That's why rewatches are important, because sometimes something can hit you kind of weird the first time. But I was like that scene. I thought it was funny. She's like, "How rich?"
Yeah.
It's like, I don't care about that. How very. And they just cut to the doctor chuckling.
That's another thing where it's like handled the wrong way, that could actually make Jackie look really selfish and materialistic, but everyone in the room just knows she's joking around. It
Just being
doesn't
Jackie.
look any worse though.
It's played up for fun.
Which brings us to the issue that we've been skirting around, which is that is the problem with most of Rose's things in any episode that Rose is in. I understand why people like her, because so much of our problem with her is just
Attitude towards people.
it's just, if you think about the dialogue in a certain context, I can understand maybe she's not being totally serious, or maybe she's just kind of having a laugh. No, if you really think about the implications of what she says, it gets weird, and you don't have the safety net that Jackie has of like, she's just kind of a goof. It's really strange. Rose really didn't bother me in these two episodes, and it kind of baffles me that that happened. I used to be really annoyed with her in these, and for whatever reason, that just didn't happen this time around.
I think she's fine here. She doesn't do anything to annoy me.
You guys
But
know about the deleted scene for this for Army of Ghosts?
I don't.
There's a scene from Army of Ghosts that got cut. Like, I think watching that might have colored my perception of this episode, like, before this viewing, because it's just the Doctor and Rose, like, before they find out about all the ghost stuff, just walking around real giggly and smiling with each other like school children, and it's just a minute of that and nothing happens. It's just the two of them, like, being all cutesy, and it's really annoying.
Probably would have had the Rose dramatic soapy theme playing.
Which, don't get me wrong, is a good piece of music, but like attached to a character I don't care about is really melodramatic. Tell me if you guys had this. Big part of the whole like narrative by people who dislike Rose as much as I do is the whole thing of like, it feels really weird that we try to push her and Ten as like true loves, and like that scene at the end with them, it's like, I love you, and it's really schmaltzy and sappy. I can't explain why I had this time watching this episode, but this time when she says like, I love you, I read that as her being platonic.
What?
I can't tell you why I have that, but that's how I took that line this time.
Because you despise Rose that much and you don't want to entertain the idea of the Doctor romance her.
The romance is part of why I despise her. I can't separate the fact that I despise her from the fact that they're clearly supposed to be a romantic thing. But watching this episode, she has that line, and I just think to myself, something about her delivery, or something about like text to this scene, it doesn't feel like a romantic Eros love declaration. It feels like I love you in the same way that Donna or Amy might say it. And this is the only episode I have that with.
No, I do think it feels like love, romantic love.
And that's how I took it every other time I watched this episode. But something like, I wish this had been the last time we ever saw Rose, because as an ending for her character, it's actually kind of effective and doesn't bother me all that much. And it feels like maybe she might have possibly grown as a person. Yeah, okay, see, it's really whiny. And that's another one of those, that's just kind of Billie Piper's approach to acting things. And I don't want to be too mean to like line deliveries, just because having this thing where I haven't seen Billie Piper in anything other than this show,
it's how she's directed because in The Diary of a Call Girl, she plays what is purposely a terrible person, whereas in Penny Dreadful, she's more likable.
I suppose the issue just all around with Billy's like contribution to my Rose hatred is a lack of subtlety. Like whenever she's sad, she's super, super sad. Whenever she's jealous, she's gotta be like cartoony jealous.
Her first acting role, so she did refine her acting in her later stuff.
Yeah. We'll have to see like how much that carries into like her showing up in season 4 and stuff.
Honestly, I don't have a problem with her delivery and stuff because looking at this scene, it feels like she's upset and she's trying to calm down enough and she's just trying to get the words out.
Yeah, like I can understand why she looks that upset. But I can also understand why someone like Edward would sit down with that and be like, "No, stop. It's too much. It's overwrought. It's cheesy. It's bad."
Moore has me hating Rose so much as a character where I'm just like, get out of here quickly.
Like you're already gone. I thought we were already finished with you.
I think that's most of the problem here. It's like, okay, you just don't like the character, so anything they're gonna do is going to kind of irritate you. When you get to that
Yeah.
point, it just you can't help it.
And it's a matter of just not even anything to do with Rose, but just the kind of show that I want this to be versus the kind of show that it is. Rose lets go of the thing, and she's about to into the whatever, and Pete comes back and grabs her, and then they're gone. And if I'm making this show, that's it. That's the last time she and the Doctor ever see each other.
Yeah.
It's sudden. It's really terrible. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. It'd make everyone who hates Rose cheer all that much more, and it would make everyone who loves Rose cry all that much more.
Yeah, because that scene where they're like, where she's pounding on the wall and stuff, that was far more emotional and sad than
Yeah,
that
but
Pete.
then it's like, just because I guess this is the kind of show that we want to be, we want to give them a moment to just, have a closure moment. It's like, I feel like the classic show was above that,
Yeah.
and we still do it to this day. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to a companion departure one of these days that's just, they're gone. Like, that's it, the end, can't see them anymore, done. It's like sometimes a lack of closure is the best thing for a plot development.
Guess you could say it's a bit of the popularity effect where when something is really popular, everyone else just wants to copy it.
But still. And you know what? It's not even just a thing with, like, this version of the show, because the audios are also guilty of it. There's something that just happened with people writing Doctor Who past a certain year, where we forgot that, sometimes we'll just have a character disappear and they'll be gone. And it'll be
Yeah.
sad, precisely because you never got to have any nice last words with them, and that's just how things are sometimes.
It works sometimes.
It worked kind of with Donna and Amy and Rory, because Amy and Rory don't ever really show back up again. It's just a hallucination of Amy.
Rory isn't there because everyone forgets Rory.
Well, they did have to leave a scene they couldn't film, sadly.
Yeah. And like Donna shows up again, and she's like relevant to the plot that time, but she and the Doctor don't ever interact.
That's how a companion should be brought back.
As not as egregious as like, oh, Rose was gone, but now here's like a follow-up with Rose, and Lucy's gone, but here's a follow-up with Lucy, and she's back for a while, and then she's gone again. It's like, I just want someone to be gone, and that's it.
They're just scared to do it because they want to make the fans happy. Some people, though, like with Clara, it did seem like a conscious decision to.
With Clara, it felt like Moffat knew how he wanted to send her off,
Yeah.
and then he did it. And then after he did it, he was like, no, that's not a good enough like send off. I have a better idea to like an actual story to do with her for a send off. And then they did that like twice.
Yeah.
And I just happened to think that the one that they finally sent her off with was the best one. So I guess it was worth it.
Yeah. And her little appearance in the Christmas special, it was just like a memory. So.
And we have slightly sidetracked, and I feel like I'm being unfair to Edward because I have made my case for why I'm fine with Rose in this episode, and yet I feel like Edward has to make his case for why Rose is not good in this episode.
All right. Complete and utter fact that she's way too casual about pitching her family and Mickey to another dimension forever just to beam up the Talker, which makes me hate the romance even more.
You know what? You're right.
And makes me want Rose to be gone even more.
I can can understand that, because to me, it was a very teenage thing to do.
Plus, okay, that does make Rose look really bad, but how else do you do it? Like, if you're Russell and you're sitting down and you've decided that, okay, how I'm gonna end this is that Rose and the Doctor are separated by another dimension. They can't see each other ever again, and Rose is stuck with her family. If earlier in the episode Rose is okay with that, that doesn't really have any emotional impact.
For me, it's kind of like the bad end result, like the bad journey we got DC Cinematic Universe ending with Justice League. Like, so what happens with Rose at the end is the result of all the badness we've had with her as a bad character.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I can just hear the angry DC fanboys over in that corner.
All two that watch this. Yeah, Rose, I will say this. Her leaving her family behind and making all that, it was in character.
She was a bad character,
Yes.
a horrible person.
Yes, it was in
Plus,
character.
okay, I can kind of excuse Pete and Mickey because Mickey is the one who himself made the decision that he would rather be off in another dimension than he would stay with Rose. So Rose making that decision back at him in turn isn't really as selfish. The only real problem is that
Definitely
Jackie is
didn't even cross
involved.
her mind.
Yeah, and Pete, we had a whole thing where like she comes to terms with the fact that he's not her dad. The only real problem as far as her making that decision is that Jackie's involved, and she's already kind of slowly been like disassociating part of her life, as we often like to do with companions.
Yeah. Also, this might be a good gateway back to there's a scene where she's talking with Jackie about basically she's mad at her daughter for basically having a life outside of her.
I empathize with Jackie in that instance, and I don't think it's a matter of Jackie being mad that Rose has her own life. It's a matter of, again, this is something that we always like to do with companions, and something that, speaking of Clara, we just straight up did with Clara to the farthest possible extreme, which is that spending too much time around the Doctor makes you like him. Again, Rose is kind of disassociating. Like, you spend enough time going around, traveling around the universe and getting all this perspective and being a gung-ho adventurer, borderline crazy person, you come back to your mom, who's just sort of not experienced any of that. Yeah, who are you? What have you done with my daughter? Again, because time travel, it's not even like the thing that will happen with parents and kids where a kid will leave and they'll come back and they'll have experienced all this stuff and like you will have experienced just as much time. Rose could be like on years and years and years worth of adventures, and she could come back and Jackie would be exactly the same, and Rose would be a completely different person. And as a mother, I imagine that's kind of a terrifying thought.
Yeah, I can understand it to a point.
Part of that is the Doctor's fault for accidentally having her be gone for a whole year. That Doctor!
Bad doctor. But anyway, but yeah, but the whole thing when she says you're not even going to be human anymore.
I don't remember her saying that. Her saying you'll just be
Don't-
like some strange
Well,
woman. I don't remember saying anything about not human.
Yeah, she says like there'll be this strange woman in an alien supermarket on some planet, but she's not Rose Tyler, not anymore.
She says she won't be Rose, not that she won't be human, which is, again, a safe assumption to make. Like, I know that we have a thing where like, Rose hasn't grown up and changed over the course of the show nearly as much as he should have, or as we think that she has in the writing room.
Yeah.
It's not like we can pretend that she's the same exact person she was at the very beginning of series 1.
The only change is that she went from having no ambition to having entitlements.
It sounds bad, but it's also a big change.
I don't know. Thinking about it over, she has become more confident. Thinking about from the 4th season and stuff. I don't think there's that much of a change with her. She has become more confident and take initiative by the end. And I think most of her character development happened like in the second half of this season. The first season and a half, it was just the same person.
Yet at the same time, it feels like there's an arc that's missing. Like, where it seems like Rose wants to be exactly like the Doctor, and it was a whole thing in series 9 with Clara where the Doctor says that is not good for you, and it's going to get you killed.
It goes beyond that also. I understand why people don't like what we did with Clara, but to me it feels like, oh, that is just so the perfect thesis statement to make that we almost sort of keep making with other companions. Like, we did it a little bit with Rose and we did it a little bit with Amy, but with Clara, it's no, this is flat out the story telling you you are becoming like the Doctor, and that is dangerous not just to you but to the literal fabric of reality.
Yeah.
Because two egos the size of the Doctor in like close vicinity to each other is not healthy for anyone.
No.
Especially if they're codependent.
Oh,
Yeah, and like we have half of that with Rose, where she has a big ego and she is slowly like becoming less of a normal person and more like the Doctor, but we don't go all the way with it, even by the time she shows back in series 4.
The later half of the Brosnan era Bond films, where they just scratch the surface of what could have been a really good idea.
I think, just to speak to the point about Jackie again, I think Edward's right when he says that the main way that Rose has changed since her first episode is ambition. And suddenly, here's this lady who has a whole bunch of ambition and wants to see and do all this stuff, where at the beginning she was just kind of content to hang around. And especially as a mother or as a parent of any kind, I think part of you always wants your kid to be like, no, see, we can just sort of be together and we can just sort of hang out and be content forever. The Rose who wanted that does not exist anymore. And that is a deliberate writing choice that we made.
I found it. Okay. It says.
Oh, wait,
okay.
Are you looking for the actual line of dialogue?
Yeah, I had it. Let's see.
And we overanalyze too much because, yeah, whatever, it's just our opinion, and I'm ripping off Stu Bagful.
And you don't have any reason to come back. You'll keep on changing. In 40 years' time, you'll just be a strange woman walking through a marketplace. But she's not Rose Tyler. She's not even human.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How did I forget that line?
Yeah.
It's not an episode where we've memorized every line from.
I feel like I would have written a note on that, and I didn't.
I was too busy eating Cheetos.
That's the right way to watch Doctor Who. Let's face it.
I guess I'm just playing like devil's advocate or Jackie's advocate a whole lot, but I don't know, you can still make the argument that, like, yes, that is dehumanizing to say to somebody. Does she mean human in the sense that, like, you're a human, you're a person that's important and I care about you, or human in the sense of, like, you were socialized on Earth among humans and you operate by human standards?
That's too deep for Jackie. I just think she doesn't like what her daughter's becoming, and she's just like, okay, she's just gonna be almost an insult.
Yeah, I mean, it is unintentionally an insult.
Unintentionally insulting.
I always overanalyze just because overanalyzing things is fun. And, like, now I'm really stuck on, like, what was going through Russell's head when he wrote that line, because there are a couple of things it could mean.
He's clouded by his love for Rose.
I'm just thinking, like, in terms of implications to actual, like, how we define the term human. Like, does he mean human in the sense of, like, you're less of a individual and you matter less to me, or you matter less in general because you're not a person anymore? Or
I think it's more like she's gonna start acting less and less human.
yeah,
And will start being detached.
that's where we go with Clara. Like, she just gets progressively weirder.
She has to go on to an adventure right before she goes on a date with Danny.
But she gets, like, addicted to it. Rose, to me, it's like, okay, she's almost like she's upset that her daughter's changing in front of her. And she's just so upset that she's just throwing something nasty out there.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that line would work better if, like we said, Rose was just stranger over time.
Mm-hmm.
Rose feels like a little bit of a different person than who we met at the beginning, but there's no sense that she's weird. That hasn't happened at all.
I don't think her personality's really changed dramatically at all. I mean, it's just like for her to go that far to even saying that, just because she's taking a little bit more initiative, you think a parent would be proud of that.
Any other parent would probably be happy to see their kid leave the nest at least a little bit, but Jackie is like super attached. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because that feels like, oh, that's a consistent character trait that makes sense that we're paying attention to.
Plus,
her
it is
husband died.
consistent. It is also consistent with the trauma of Rose disappearing for a year and not knowing what happened to her.
Yeah, and just the fact that your husband is dead, her father's gone. What we know about Jackie would naturally make it so that she has attachment issues. And the more we talk about it, the more I'm glad that we don't like have a whole speechy dialogue scene talking about that. It's just a thing about Jackie that's part of her character, is that she's
Yeah,
overly attached.
because telling and not showing is totally the way to tell visual storytelling.
We actually show and don't tell with Jackie's characterization, and that's admirable, I think.
That's good. And this thing
But
it bugged me the whole time. Okay, we start the episode out and we have of Rose saying that she's going to die.
oh, I hate that.
Story of how I died. Oh, shut up, Rose. You have half the fandom on your side. You'll be fine.
The whole thing was so bad because okay, we start the episode out telling we're going to kill a companion off. That kills a lot of suspense right there. And then they don't even deliver on it.
That's not a thing that's unique to this show. Other shows do that where it's like we're building up to a character death, but it's totally figurative. Like that's the crux of what's that Will Ferrell movie? Stranger Than Fiction. Like Stranger Than Fiction is basically a whole movie that builds up to this guy has to die, but he dies in like a figurative sort of sense, or like we find a way to cheat it. It's fine there because that's like the entire conflict resolution of that story. It's not like we spend the whole episode like dramatically foreshadowing Rose's death. We just have a
It's
cheap
worse.
little tag at the beginning where
It's
it's like,
worse with the whole he will knock 4 times and you'll die doctor thing.
Yeah.
yeah.
Where it's like, the show's not going to be great when I'm gone. I don't want to go. Don't enjoy Matt Smith. Ah!
Promise this is the last time I'll bring up Clara, but it's exactly like what we do with Clara again. She actually does die, and then the entire conflict of Heaven Sent and Hellbent is, well, Heaven Sent retroactively, but the entire conflict of Hellbent is she going to actually remain dead or isn't she? And so when she isn't like dead by the end of the story, it's like, okay, we know she dies eventually, but the fact that she's off on an adventure is sort of fine because you know what? That has been the conflict of these 45 minutes. That's the resolution. Here, is Rose going to die or isn't she has not been the conflict of the story. It's, do we stop the Daleks and the Cybermen or don't we? Rose, like, getting sectioned off is a byproduct of all that. It's
Yeah.
not like the whole story is trying to save Rose.
Yes. And you could cut that scene and it would make for a better episode.
Yeah, it's just such a cheap little. We're gonna pretend that this is what this story is about when it's not.
It's just there to create cheap hype buzz.
And when they reveal why you're legally dead in this other universe.
It sets this really bad precedent that we keep doing for a couple of seasons, where like the he will knock 4 times thing, where instead of doing what we used to do and what we've sort of made a habit of doing again, where it's like we'll just have an adventure and the companion leaving will just be a byproduct of the adventure that we started as a normal sort of adventure. If we just took out that scene at the beginning, that's exactly what we'd have. The Doctor and Rose aren't building to any sort of finality in their relationship over the course of this episode.
It's completely stupid, like you said. And then when they, like you said, explain why she's technically dead and why she said that, it's laughably embarrassingly bad.
It's the exact same problem in reverse of like having that coda at the end where like, no, we need to give them closure. Let's randomly have a arbitrary hole in the universe just open. Okay, just so that they can have a moment. It's that same thing of like, how much more impactful would it be if there was no foreshadowing? If it was just, this is a season-ending adventure, we gotta stop the Daleks and the Supermen, we stop them, and then Rose is gone.
Better if there was no foreshadowing and Rose's fate was getting sucked into the void to die.
It's like what we do eventually with Amy and Rory. We're sort of maybe building to the idea that they're coming to an end, but not really. Like they're going strong, and The Angels in Manhattan is just another adventure. It's just the Doctor, Amy, and Rory and River solving another mystery. And then we do the thing with the book where it's like, no, you're building up to this thing, and it's like, that's not what this story is about.
Yeah, they should have took the book part. That was one part I really hated in the episode. The thing I will say, the episode does kind of have going for it there. In the middle of the season, So it's like you don't really think anything's gonna happen to him unless you follow all the news.
Yeah, it's just again the best examples are probably like Donna and I guess also Bill, where it's like we just start the episode with no indication of where their fate is gonna be, but over the course of what should have been just a regular, mystery or adventure,
Yeah,
something really bad happens, and now we're stuck with the consequences.
yeah.
And that just feels so much more genuine.
That's what I wish they would have done more with Amy and Roy. Like, even though like the overall episode, that was one like sticking point. It's like just have it to where, and it kind of did a little bit because, like I said, it's just okay to start out just trying to fight the angels and stop something from happening. But yeah, but anyway, we're getting off topic. But this,
Yeah, it's
we're building
bad.
up. Yeah, this is building up towards Rose's death, and then they don't even kill her, and it just feels cheap all around. I think the reason why they did this was because during the rest of the season, I think Rusty Davis wanted to have all the episodes connected in some way, but he didn't know how to do it. So he just has like a word or just a sayings, and this is something that happens later on.
And also, why have it named Bad Wolf Bay?
because just because.
That's like one of those too cute details. Like, no, that's
About as random
what-
as the amount of times they bring up the Medusa Cascade in Series 4.
even though at least there it's like, okay, I can buy that that's something that he would like say in the context that he says it. Here it's just like it feels like the universe has a mind of its own and just wants their last moment to be here because it's cute.
Russell T Davies is currently the universe.
And I feel
Yeah.
really bad because this might be the last thing I have to say about this episode, but I feel like I've hit all my notes. And I don't want to end it saying a bad thing because I really do like this episode.
It's hard not to talk about because it is the last thing that happened.
It's not the last thing that happens. Thing that happens is Donna shows up out of nowhere and it's perfect.
There we go. We have something that good to end it on. Of course, Don, the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, at least we're done with Series 2 because this has been frustrating for me to watch because I've been having the experience of the 10th Doctor, my favorite Doctor as I remember him, and the 10th Doctor here in Series 2 as I'm watching him.
This is growing pains. This series we haven't exactly worked out what kind of doctor we're dealing with yet. First, The Runaway Bride, another episode that I like flip-flop on, so that'll be fun to talk about.
That'll be fun. So overall thoughts, while there is some very good moments in the first episode, mostly with Jackie, except for that one scene, I didn't care for the first episode. It was a little dull for me. But the second episode I really liked.
Yeah, I think this is a really good just entertainment value and character moments episode for everyone who isn't Rose. Just everyone's really charming and everyone's just got a lot of chemistry and the Cybermen and the Daleks are fun and it's just a really breezy watch. This is good. It's good. This is a good episode.
This is a bit of a tough call because I was enjoying it when I was watching it, but then when it was done, the only stuff that sticks out are the parts that frustrated me, which involved Rose and the 10th Doctor.
It's about the journey sometimes.
I don't know. I guess another last positive note that I can say about this is that for as annoying as Rose might be at points, there wasn't a moment for me in this episode like there could be in other episodes where she made 10 worse. I feel like 10 was generally written on point even when Rose wasn't in these episodes. When she's at her worst, it's like the two of them in a feedback loop.
Yeah.
It is. It's good. Bye-bye. This is an unceremonious ending.
Bye.